to the BuiltOnAir podcast, the variety show for all things Airtable. Each episode, we cover 4 different segments. It's always fresh and different and lots of fun while you get the insider info on all things Airtable. Our hosts and guests are some of the most senior experts in the Airtable community. Join us live each week on our YouTube channel every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern and join our active community at BuiltOnAir.com/join. Before we begin, a word from our sponsor, OnToAir.com. Any business running on Airtable gets the value that Airtable has, but also needs a few more functions to complete their operations. That's where OnToAir comes in. It's a suite of tools for any business running on Airtable to maximize your operations efficiencies and automations. One customer, John, states that OnToAir enables his business to function properly without having to think about building their own software, and that is pretty invaluable. The OnToAir Airtable apps are amazing, and we use them often and are very happy with the results. So join John and hundreds more customers and take your Airtable to the next level with OnToAir. Sign up today with promo code BuiltOnAir for a 10% discount. Check them out at OnToAir.com. And now let's check out today's episode and see what we built on air. Welcome back to 2022, the new year and the new episode, the new season. We are starting season 10 of the Built on Air podcast. I can't believe we have gotten to 10 seasons. And after a little break in December, we're back at it now in January with the new season. Myself, Dan Fellers, and we're back at it now in January with the new season. Myself, Dan Fellers, and our regular host, Camille, is with us. Welcome back, Camille. Good to see you again. And we have a regular face around here, Scott Rose, back with us, I believe, the 3rd time you've been on our podcast.
Yes. Happy New Year. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Glad to have you back with us. So we always have a fun show planned for you. Scott's going to share some insights with us, and we'll learn about some new things. I'll do a quick kind of run through of what the show is. We always do 4 segments. We begin with Around the Bases, where we talk about what's going on in the Airtable communities, get you caught up on everything you need to know about the latest news and updates. Then we'll do a spotlight from our primary sponsor, OnToAir. Then Scott will go through a common question that he's seen in the audience questions and walk through that. Then Scott will also show us on an Automate Create, talking about how to use a third-party platform called Integromat to work with your Airtable for automations. And then a final spotlight on our sponsor, OnToAir. And then we'll end up with an app highlight, learning about a new app in the marketplace. So with that, we'll do our Around the Bases. And since we've been off for a month, a lot's happened. I wanted to first highlight some big news in the Airtable world that did happen in December. So Airtable announced that they raised $735 million fundraise, which is crazy, and now valued at $11 billion. They've raised $1.4 billion to date. So if you ever wondered how much money does it cost to build an Airtable-like platform, $1.4 billion. Which is crazy. So it looks like they've got some new investors. Franklin Templeton, Salesforce, and Michael Dell's investment group. So Salesforce I thought was interesting. I think I commented in our Slack community that I personally hope that Salesforce doesn't get any ideas of buying Airtable.
Yeah, I was going to ask that question. I know nothing about funding and the intricacies of like the tech world in that capacity. So I was wondering if Salesforce has funded Airtable, does that, reasonable suspicion that they maybe have their eye on it to either increase integrations, which would be great, or to acquire Airtable, which would be not the best, from my opinion.
Yeah, you got to imagine from Salesforce perspective, I mean, they've already bought Slack. Airtable would be, I would think, an ideal acquisition for them. I also know Howie Liu, the CEO right here. I listened to this broadcast, and I've listened to him in the past. He actually sold his previous company to Salesforce, and then he worked at Salesforce, so he knows the Salesforce management team. I've also heard him publicly state that he has no intentions of selling and wants to make Airtable basically become a Salesforce size company. And so I think their vision is to be an independent company. Why they took money from Salesforce, I don't know. I'd love to hear him, answer that specifically. But yeah, definitely draw some flags of it. For sure, it gives Salesforce insight into the business and might make it easier for them to acquire down the road.
I think it's a good sign that Salesforce has not really meddled too much with Slack. Like they've sort of seems like they've maintained their independence and it's still the same product. So if they did acquire Airtable, we would hope that maybe they would do the same thing, just leave Airtable do its thing.
Yeah. Yeah. One argument is that by investing in them, that kind of also signals to the market and to us that Salesforce maybe won't try to compete directly with a competitive product because they'll already benefit now from the success of Airtable by being an investor. And so maybe that's a good sign that maybe it's kind of a hands-off. We won't move into that space.
Right. That's a good point.
So we'll see there. But yeah, we'll likely see more integration. Maybe you'll see Airtable embedded deeper into Salesforce, and Airtable already has integration where you can sync your Salesforce data into Airtable. Maybe we'll see the reverse side as well. So interesting development. But he also did say that the next step for Airtable, this is enough money to get them to profitability and be stable enough to go public on their terms. And so his reasoning for yet another fundraise, because they raised close to another 700 million earlier in the year, like in April. And so, a lot of money that I don't think they were burning through. I don't feel like they're burning crazy amounts of money. Honestly, there's probably all three of us know ways where they could spend even more money and fixing some things. So it'll be interesting to see. So basically, they are lining themselves up to be a public company, which I think signals to the market in general that they, definitely have long-term plans to be around, and now they have enough capital where they're not going anywhere anytime soon. I don't think so. Overall, could be a good thing as long as they spend their money wisely. All right. The next thing I thought.
Can we apply to be on their financial distribution team on how they should spend?
Yes. Yeah, that would be nice. They need to bring it on the podcast and before they make any decisions. All right. Next, with the new year, I thought it'd be interesting to go through and maybe each of us pick out one of your favorite features that got released in 2021. So I'm on the What's New page, which doesn't have everything that they've released, but it has, I would hope, all the big ones. So I'm going back to, so here's the beginning of 2021. So it looks like some Outlook enhancements. Oh, so regex was beginning of 2021. That seems like a long time ago. Gantt as a view. So external sources, Google, some new ones, some new automations. So external syncing.
Multi-source syncing was pretty big too.
Syncing. Salesforce. Recurring automations, Google Workspace, some updates to the app, Salesforce, create view. So what they, timeline view, advanced filters, that was a big one, interface designer, bulk field permissions, some of these enterprise ones, view updates. some mobile. So what's your favorite from 2021?
It's kind of tough for me. I think was at scheduled time for automations. Was that this past year? I think I saw that on the list. If not, it was some other. So. It was some other automation. If not, then the one I think that surprised me the most about how much I would find use for it is probably view sections, because most of my bases are for me. I don't have that many views, but at the same time, there was like one project I was using Airtable for my day job essentially, and being able to put views in folders made it so much easier to find what I needed. It was just, it was a small change, but it was genuinely very helpful. Yes. So it wasn't anything that I had ever asked for as a feature, but I had seen other people ask for it, and I was like, I guess that would be useful. It's useful, and I'm glad they added it.
Yeah. Yep.
It's so funny that Camille said that, because I was actually thinking that the things that I love the most also are when they make the little refinements, like in automations, when we could change triggers or...
Oh, yeah.
That was huge.
I think we discovered that during an episode of BuiltOnAir. I think we were doing an automate create, and I was like, hold on. Everybody stop. Can you change the trigger now? That was pretty great. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Oh, I see Justin.
View sections, regex, interface designer. Regex is also great. There's so many formulas that are complicated series of substitutes and find and all of that. And then regex. I don't understand regex, but I know it's simpler now. If I just...
it's there. You need it.
Exactly.
And of course, interface designer. But interface designer is still kind of new. And so, I love the start of it. It's not quite at a place yet, I think, for a lot of us. But they did resolve one of the bugs that was kind of annoying for me for interface designer. So it's already, faster on the track of being super usable for some of my use cases.
Yeah. Which was the bug that they fixed for you?
It was if you had multiple record pickers, so like table A and then all the linked records, and then use those linked records as the source for a second record picker, the URL that it would build wouldn't get rid if you switch to a new record in table A. It's linked to different table B records, but it didn't update the list of table B records. So you'd be seeing, part of your interface would be showing records that no longer apply because it's only it didn't connect as deeply before. And they fixed that. And Jordan Scott, the community manager at Airtable, went back and updated that thread and was like, hey, by the way, we fixed this bug. And I was like, yay. Because it was
that's awesome.
It was very confusing using Interface Designer before if you didn't recognize that was what was happening, and then they fixed it. So it's well on its way.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
They also, one that's not on here yet because it's not out of beta, but automation, branching or layers of automation. That might be more a 2022 release, but that's available in beta. That's interesting. I'm going to go with, for me, little bit different look, just because you guys have already mentioned some of the bigger ones. But when they put Gantt and now timeline as views, that to me is a big signal of potential for the future.
Yep.
So I think that idea, although it's interesting, they almost have competing strategies now with the interface designer of, do you do things through views or through the interface designer? It'll be interesting to see which approach they put more emphasis on going forward of, how you view your data. You almost wonder if they kind of devalue the views and kind of recreate that functionality inside of the interface designer in some way.
Yeah, because you can embed a grid, which doesn't necessarily have to show the same records as a view. You could set it your own separate filters from whatever views you established in the regular Airtable interface. And you could also embed a timeline element. Gantt, calendar, Kanban, those aren't available in Interface Designer yet. And so to me, it seems like they had to do grid because it's the most basic one. And they did timeline because it was the most recent one. So the code was fresh and it was probably easier to integrate into Interface Designer. And my suspicion is that over time, as they like tweak the other older views, they might start showing up in Interface Designer as well. And maybe there's, maybe Interface Designer is the super view where you can have a regular view kind of in the corner, but extra information off to the side as well. And I think that might be the approach they take. But also, I don't know anything. So
yeah. In theory, if they recreated all the views as like types of interface designs, in theory, you could replace the whole view concept inside of Interface Designer, right? And that becomes the new interface.
I think a friend of the show, Kavan, said, I don't remember if it was on one of these episodes or in a separate conversation, but she had talked about, the idea of decoupling queries from views. A lot of times you use views as your method of saying, only show me a subset of records. But if there was a separate, query, panel that you just establish a list of queries and filters and whatnot, then you'd be able to apply them to both interfaces and views and have it only change that option once, if you will. And that might affect a bunch of other different things as well. And I think, if we're going the route of maybe Interface Designer replaces the necessity of views, maybe Kavan's idea is also, dovetails into that nicely as well.
Yeah, that could be interesting. A lot of things they can do now. They've got a lot of kind of sort of core functionality that they can build on, and it'll be interesting to see where they go this year, 2022. So fun stuff.
At one point, I was hoping that Page Designer would become a view, but now it sort of feels like maybe that won't happen. Maybe they want us to do all future interfaces in Interface Designer. I don't know.
Justin says, my biggest pain point with the Interface Designer, it only takes 2 clicks to get back to the base, but 4 to 5 clicks to get into an interface. Yeah, it's, depending on where you start from, it's not super intuitive to get into the precise tools. There's interfaces and there's interface pages as well. So you might be able to get to the interface, but, having a direct link to the interface page would be nice. Maybe it's a drop down when you're looking at the base, so you could go straight to where you want to go first.
Yeah. I feel like there'll be huge changes in the future. Like what you were saying, maybe interfaces will become the master, view, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, ideally, and like what you were saying with Page Designer and then all the other apps, like that's my big wish list, is being able to view apps inside of the Interface Designer.
Yeah. I started a new app project and working with another developer, and he had started an interface for the client, and I had started building an app, and it occurred to me it would be so great if I could build half of my app and embed it in the interface. And, because there's really only so much in terms of user, UI design that is not possible in Airtable via regular Airtable or the Interface Designer that I would need to build. And I'm building all the extra stuff in it just so they could look at one thing at a time. Yeah. It would be nice if I could use Interface Designer because it handles what it does fairly well, and then just build the piece that isn't, that they didn't account for yet. But that's not in the cards right now.
Yeah. For sure.
Hopefully 2022.
Yeah, maybe.
Very good. All right. We've got a couple other things that I was going to show, just kind of a few updates throughout December. Chris Dancy, friend of the show, always has some amazing stuff to show. He shared some Interface Designer that he's working on. always very visually appealing. So if you ever see Chris share stuff on Twitter, Reddit, or Facebook, definitely check out his stuff. Pretty cool interface design that he's working on. Let's see what else we got. This was one on Twitter. This was interesting, just kind of seeing how people use Airtable out in the wild. I always like to see that. This looks like an investor, venture capitalist. And so his community and response are a lot of investors that it's kind of interesting how many people said that they use Airtable to manage their workflows and their fund investments all through Airtable. So I always like to highlight when people are sharing real world examples of using Airtable and what else people, this was kind of cool. So real estate investment, and they've got looks like all their floor maps and everything inside of there. So pretty cool use cases of Airtable out in the wild.
I did see one reply that said Airtable is the new Excel, and that scares me.
Yeah.
They're just different.
Yeah, for sure. I thought this one was kind of cool. This is Aaron, who works at Airtable. He does one of their or several of their podcasts as well. Worth checking out. And just kind of talking about the evolution of software development. Build it yourself versus buying versus no code. I don't think it's that simple, but kind of shows how simplifying or how software is getting easier to get up and running. Still not quite this simple, even with no code software, but definitely lowering the bar to get started.
Yeah.
Good stuff there. I'm going to skip this one. So yeah, that's kind of a roundup of what we missed. There's definitely a lot more. We're not going to get into the weeds of every individual question like we might normally do, but definitely wanted to highlight some of the bigger ones, especially the fundraise from Airtable, if you hadn't heard about that and what they plan to do with it. So excited to see the future. I think there's a bright future for Airtable, and we will always be a part of it. So hopefully you tell your friends to join us each week. All right, with that, we're going to move on to our spotlight. OnTair is our primary sponsor. It's an all-in-one toolkit to run your business on Airtable. I'm the founder of OnTair and want to share some highlights. And we have 6 current different apps that are that run on Airtable, and our plan for 2022 is to get all of our apps into the marketplace. We started building apps for Airtable before the marketplace existed, before third-party developers. So many of our apps existed outside of the Airtable marketplace and ecosystem. Our goal this year, you will see us moving all of our apps into the marketplace so that they're easier to access and utilize. And our goal is to increase the number of apps that we have in the marketplace this year by 2x. So we hope to have 10 plus apps in the store by the end of the year. So that's what we'll be doing. And our latest update that I'll show is our Amplify app. One person actually was Chris Dancy, who publicly shared that Amplify is what Airtable's interface designer should have been designed. So high praise from Chris there that we like to share. And so Amplify is an app to interact with your data. There's different editors that you can create to interact with your data, to augment and extend how you're looking at your data, what kind of data is inside of there, whether it's Markdown or JSON or links to Google Docs. You can edit different types of data inside of these block views, and you can create layouts similar to interfaces inside of there. One feature that we just released in our new version that went out in December is the ability to set up filtered records. So you can set up records for each table that are filtered depending specifically to that user. So each user will only see records that are designed for that user to see. Now, this doesn't mean that they can't see them over here on the left, that we don't have control over what data they see here, but we can control what they see inside of the Amplify app. So the easiest way to do that with filtered records is to use a collaborator, because the app knows who the current logged in user is, but it doesn't have to be a collaborator field. You can specify certain users can only see values associated with this field. So you can pick any field and then create kind of a mapping of what users can see what records based off of the value of that field. But I'll do collaborator because it's the easiest, because you don't have to set up configuration for each user. And so once you do that and you save it, then you just have to go into each layout and specify that for this layout, you want to use the filtered records that are configured for each table. And then once you do that, you'll notice, so I am this Openside Airtable user. And so I'm only going to see records that are assigned to me. So you see I'm on this, this company here, quote Texon. And so when I navigate through my records, it's only going to show me ones that are assigned to me. So you see it's skipping down to this one, and then I'm only seeing, looks like 4 that I have access to. So you can set up this where you can have your team members only interact with data and records that are assigned to them, or however you configure it dynamically based off of the collaborator field or some other field that you want to configure it. So extremely powerful way to manage what records your team members can interact with. So that's just one feature I wanted to highlight in Amplify. There's many, many more. Play with it. Check it out. Just click on Add an App and find us in, right now we're down below Hidden. Find us right here in the marketplace, add it, play with it. And there's a 14-day free trial to test it and see if it fits your needs. With that, we're going to move on to Scott, if you want to share your screen.
Yes.
And we'll go through an audience question with you.
Okay.
There you go.
Yes. You know, one question that came up 4 times over the holidays in the community forums was, it seems like a very simple question. It is, how can you display the like the latest information? How can you look up like the latest information from a series of linked records, for example? So like if you have, in this instance here, like an invoicing system, and you have customers, and each customer has a whole bunch of invoices, how could you create a lookup field right here that would maybe show you the most recent dollar amount from the latest invoice, for example?
This is a classic conundrum. And to clarify, it's not just what is the most recent date from the invoices, because you could just use the roll up and say max. You mean whichever one of those is the maximum date. All right, now look at that record's something else.
Exactly. And you can already see that you could do this, and you could think about this in many different ways. Like maybe what was trying to think of other examples. You know, this applies to many different scenarios, not just customers and invoices. Yeah. But yeah, the idea is pick like the latest linked record, but we want to look up data just from that one. Mm-hmm. So yeah, like Camille said, a classic conundrum. So I'm going to show how you can actually do that. So basically here we have 2 customers in our customers table, and each one of them is linked to 2 invoices. And if we go to our invoices table here, we can see that we have 4 invoices, and they were each created at different times. So, you know, some are newer than others. And here's the customer that they're linked to. And here's the services. This is just looked up from our services table here. And this is the dollar amounts looked up, and then here's the total due. So let's say that we were on this customers table here, and you want to know what was the amount of Jane Smith's most recent invoice. So basically, the first thing we have to do is we have to figure out what is the date of the most recent invoice. So basically, to solve this little dilemma, we actually have to go back and forth between our tables and create a series of fields. So you would start by creating a roll-up field here, and you can call this whatever you want. Like maybe I just call this max invoice date, let's say, and you create a roll-up here. And we're going to pull from the invoices table, and we're going to look for the date created. So that's an auto creation field there, the Airtable's built-in creation date field. And for our formula here, I'm just going to say max values. And then when we create that field, we will see the latest date.
Bless you.
The Jeopardy music.
Come on, Airtable. This is the easy part.
This is it. Exactly.
How many records are in that table? Like 3?
Yeah. I think there's 8 records total.
Exactly.
Oh my goodness.
This is the easy part, right?
Yeah. I don't know. Try refreshing. Sometimes
take 1 million of the 735 million they raised.
I've noticed somewhat, not regularly, I'd say, but I've noticed it a couple times in the past month. Sometimes Airtable would do that, and I would refresh, and it made the field like we see here, but it would, I would be stuck in the spinning wheel, even though it did the action. It just never showed it to me.
Yeah. So, Justin says reload.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so funny. As soon as I hit,
I'm not alone.
Yeah, the field was right there. Yeah, this is actually a misleading title here. I'm going to say the latest invoice date. So now what we have here is for each one of these people, we have the date and time of their most recent invoice. So then what we would want to do is come back here to the invoices table. And now what we want to do is we want to look up this customer's most recent invoice date. We're going to pull it from the customers table. So in other words, we're going to be looking up the roll-up field.
Yep.
And so just to spell this out real clearly, I'll say this customer's latest invoice date. You don't have to have your fields have that long of titles, but so I'm going to look up from this customer, and we're going to pull in the latest invoice date. So now we can see that for each customer here, so Jane Smith is these first 2 records here, and you'll see that she has the exact same value for each of these because Jane's latest invoice is this, and then John Smith's latest invoice is this. So wait, if I just extend this a little bit, you probably see this a little better. So now you can see where it's pulling these from. So here are the 2 date creation dates for Jane Smith. But then for both of her records, it's going to yield the most recent one. So then the next step is there's actually a couple different ways you can handle this. But the way that I usually do it is I then create a formula here. Is that what you guys do? A formula to sort of tag what the latest one is?
I have a similar sort of implementation where I would use a roll-up field instead of a lookup to get the maximum date, if you will, because roll-up fields allow you to use regular formula functions. So within that same roll-up field, I'll be like, all right, now is that maximum the same as date created? If so, yes. If not, no.
Oh, so would you do that in?
So you could reduce the number of fields, but it's that's not how Airtable wants you to do it. So this is probably the safest option.
Okay.
Most reliable option as well.
Interesting. I'd love to see your option as well. I'll show you my option, which is more, it sort of breaks it down a little more, but it sounds like yours is significantly more efficient though.
Well, yours is easier to understand and again, more reliable. So let's do it this way.
Okay, we'll do it this way first. So I'd love to see yours if we have time for it. So I'm going to add a field here. So I'm going to add a formula here, and I'm just going to say, is this did Jen make a comment here? That's such a, this will help so many people.
Yeah. Everyone needs this implementation.
Yeah. Right.
Whichever method you go about it, the idea of looking up the latest records something everyone has scratched their heads a billion times trying to figure out.
Totally. So I'm going to create a formula here. I'm just going to call it latest invoice ? And then what I do is I create a formula that compares the lookup field, this customer's latest invoice date, if that lookup field is equal to this record's invoice date, which is, date created actually in this case. So yeah. Oh yeah, by the way, yes, I've sort of been saying invoice date and I'm using created date, but you know what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah.
Use the appropriate date fields in your system. So if this customer's latest invoice date is the date created here, then I'm just going to say yes. Otherwise, I'll put no. So then when you create this, now we can quickly see for each one of these customers, which one is their latest invoice. So they have no or yes. So then coming back here, and by the way, you should only have one yes for each customer. So for example, if we were to create another invoice here for Jane Smith, let me just create a new one here real quick. And we'll link it to Jane Smith. We'll see that, yeah, she has 2 no's and a yes. There should only be 1 yes for any given customer at any given time. Because that's important for this next part. When you go back to the customers table, now what you can do is you can create a lookup. So let's say we want to say, this is the actual field we were trying to build towards, which is the latest invoice dollar amount, let's call it. And we will create a lookup field here. And we are going to pull from the invoices table. And what we're going to do is, actually, there's a couple different ways you could do this too. You could also do roll up. There's a couple different ways. The way that I'm going to do it now is I'm going to choose the total due on the invoice, but I'm only going to include the linked records where the latest invoice is yes. And there's other ways of doing this too, but this is just one example. And then here you see that the latest invoice for Jane was actually $0 because it was that new one I just created. And the latest invoice for John is $5,500. And then if we go back here to see, we will see that, actually, I'm going to sort this by customer here. So we'll see that if we look at all 3 of Jane's invoices, here they are in date order as well. Her latest one is $0 and John's latest one is $5,500. Well, actually, both of John's are $5,500. So let me change that. Oops. So if we go back here, it should still say 0 and 5,500. Yeah. So that's that. Camille, where were you saying you would put the roll up? Would you put that here in this table?
No, in invoices, I would have a roll up field here. And what it would be is from customer, and then latest invoice date. And then the aggregation formula would be basically the formula that you already wrote in latest invoice. It would be if, and the reason why I said Airtable doesn't want you to do this is because although roll-up fields accept regular formula functions, they don't autocomplete, and neither do field names for your current field. So you have to make sure you spell everything right, and it's not going to help you do it this way, which is why it's not the recommended way, but it is possible. But it
saves the formula. Yeah.
We're trying to dissuade you from doing formulas in here.
Yeah, I don't even know if it's documented in Airtables because it'll let you do it, but it doesn't want you to. So it would be if, the brackets date created, and then making sure you spell it exactly. See, it's not showing you what the correct field name is like a regular formula would, but equals, and then
is it this customer's latest invoice date?
I would say max values here, because this is where you actually use the aggregation.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Comma, yes, comma, no.
Very cool.
So I think this will work if you hit create. No. Okay, so there's a problem. It's possible but there's something about it that I didn't do quite right when I was thinking about it. So, I don't know.
Oh, you know what? If we're just the latest invoice date would just have one value, right? Oh, no, we're rolling up. Oh, we are looking for the
But we're getting the maximum, so it should be one value anyway. I feel like I've done this before. See, this is why I just go with Scott's idea.
Interesting.
It's probably, I mean, it might work with strings. Maybe it's because a date doesn't actually look like a date. It's Unix timestamps. So,
right. Yeah, it's so funny. We will figure this out 2 minutes after the podcast is over.
Yeah. I'm going to go back to whatever base I did this in and being like, oh.
Right.
There is one caveat. I remember doing something like this. I actually remember doing this before they had the ability to filter like your lookups. And that made it even trickier. You had to do other things. But I think there is still one caveat that you can't use the date field in your key formula. Like it doesn't, it will become like an infinite lookup or something.
Oh.
Right. So like if your invoice number like concatenated the date that you're using for the lookup, I don't think it likes when the value is part of the key field. I think that I ran into issues with that at one point.
Yeah. So whatever I was thinking of, it was probably just a string value that I was doing the comparison with, and probably that's why.
Interesting.
So yeah, don't do it this way.
We may be able to. Yeah, there's probably a way to do it. Probably like forcing it, like turning that into a string here.
Yeah, the and quotation marks to make it a string or whatever. But yeah,
there's some way to figure this. I'm sure we could figure this out somehow.
Yeah.
But maybe not when we're on. Maybe not when we're running out of time.
Never do it live. I don't know why I haven't learned my lesson yet.
Very true. Awesome. Thank you, Scott, for that. Audience, that's definitely a common question that comes up. So hopefully the people looking for that, we can direct them here to get their answer and how that works. So our next one, we're going to keep with Scott. We're going to keep things going. And Scott, why don't you tell us a little bit about Integromat and how you use it and give us some insight there.
Oh, yeah. So if you see me in the forums, I talk about Integromat almost every day. I really love Integromat. It's an automation and integration platform that you can use with Airtable. It competes head-to-head against Zapier. And I used Zapier for years, and I still have many of my clients using Zapier. But then when I discovered Integromat, which is a relatively new discovery for me, I was blown away at what I thought was so much more powerful than Zapier. It actually just blew away a lot of the limitations that Zapier has. And it was a lot cheaper than Zapier, which my clients really liked. And I find it much, much more user-friendly once you get to know it. So that's one of the things. Zapier is so much easier to like dive into and just start doing things. Integromat, there's a little bit of a learning curve. It takes a little while. It's a little bit more complex at the beginning, but then I find it way more user-friendly because you can drag and drop things. It's a canvas, almost like Photoshop, where you can just drag and drop things around on the screen, which I really like. And now Airtable, of course, introduced automations, about a year and a half ago. And the thing is, there's still some limitations in Airtable's automations. Like it would be great if we didn't have to use Integromat or Zapier at all. But some of the more common limitations in Airtable are you're limited to a maximum of 25 automations total, which a few of my clients have already hit. 50,000 runs only on the Pro plan. And I guess if you email support, they sort of have like an unofficial policy of like letting you have more runs. But officially, they stop you at 50,000 runs for the month. Of course, they don't have conditionals yet, although that's coming soon. And there's other limitations of Airtable's automations. For example, if you do a find records, you can't then loop through your found records, for example, and do something for each one of those. You have to write a script if you want to do that. So there's a lot of little limitations of Airtable's automations that also push people towards Zapier and Integromat. And Yeah, so I was thinking that maybe it would be cool for us to sort of show off how easy it is to get started with Integromat and sort of build something from scratch, perhaps.
Yeah,
Sure.
let's do it.
I was thinking maybe we could use this sample system that we were just all working on together, because now we're very intimate and familiar with our customers and our invoices here. Is there anything that you guys could think of that would be cool to automate or maybe integrate with?
Something that's done all the time is like email the customer their latest invoice or whatever. Once an invoice is marked as paid or complete or something, send them a confirmation email saying thank you for paying or whatever. So maybe that's something that we could do with this sort of setup and include the total due amount.
Great. Yeah, that's a great idea. So let's do that. And let's see, do I have email addresses? Yeah, we have email addresses here. And basically, the funny thing is that is something that is possible with Airtable's automations, but I'm going to show how you would actually recreate that in Integromat.
Yeah.
So what we would do here is, well, first let's set up our Airtable database, and let's maybe have like a check mark, for example, that says like when it's ready to send, perhaps.
Sure.
So we'll do a send invoice, or maybe we'll call this email invoice, and maybe we'll have a checkbox here, so we'll know when when we're ready to email that invoice to somebody. And so then we'll go into Integromat here, and this is sort of what the interface looks like when you're looking at all your different scenarios. This is like scrolling through all your automations in Airtable. And I'm going to create a new scenario up here. Create a new scenario. And then you click on this plus sign here, and it gives you a list of all the different apps that they support. And I always think how clever it is that Airtable put themselves right at the top of the list alphabetically.
That helps, yeah.
That was one of the reasons that one of the many reasons that Steve Jobs named Apple. He wanted to be in the beginning of the phone book, and he wanted to be ahead of Atari.
Yeah.
So basically, there's a bunch of different ways that you can trigger. So I chose Airtable. Then it gives you the built-in triggers that you can use, or actions that you can use with Airtable. And by the way, for all of the apps that they have in Integromat, they also include this make an API call. So you can just custom write your own API calls if they don't support it, or if you want to do something that's more complex, you can always do your own custom API calls. So in our case, there's a couple different ways we can do this. One is we can watch records, and this is sort of an instant. This is actually not an instant trigger. When you watch records for changes, it does it on a schedule, and Zapier does it on a schedule as well, I believe. And it's based on your billing plan, so you can have it check for changes up to every 60 seconds, so every 1 minute. I'm on a free plan here, and so the lowest you can go is every 15 minutes. If you try to do something less, what does it do? It says here, it must be higher than or equal to 15. At some point, I think when you save it, it goes back up to 15 if you're on the free plan. So that's one way you could do it. You could just have it watching your records for changes on a schedule. But there's other ways you can do it as well. If you wanted to go instantaneously and trigger it, one great way to do it is you can trigger a webhook in Integromat. And so when you check that checkbox in Airtable, you can actually use an Airtable script to automatically send a webhook to Integromat, and it'll trigger right then. You don't have to wait for the every 1 minute or the every 5 minutes or the every 15 minutes based on your plan. So anyways, for now, we'll do this watch records thing here. And you choose your connection. That's you set up your own Airtable connection based on your API key. So this is essentially a specific API key that I had already previously typed in. And then you choose the base that you want to use. We're going to use our invoices base. And then we will say, which table do we want to monitor? So we'll monitor the invoices table. And then this is how you trigger it. It actually looks for either a created time field or a last modified time field. And that's how it knows when your record has changed. So in our case, in this specific example, we probably wanted to only trigger, or we know that we only wanted to trigger actually, when we check this checkbox. So what we would want to do for this particular scenario is we would want to create a modified date for, when we change that particular field. So what I would do is I would choose a last modified time. Well, really, it's called last modified time. And we just want to look at this one field, the email invoice field. And so when we create this field, this will update only when we check the checkbox here. So if this one's ready, then that gets updated. But if we change something somewhere else, this modified time is not going to change because it's based on just this field. So we're going to tell Integromat to look for this particular field here. So, and that's how it's going to know that we check that checkbox. And so that'll be our trigger field. So actually, I will need to, actually going to have to cancel because we just added a field, so we need to reload. Oh, I could have also clicked on this little refresh icon here. So does this make sense so far?
Yep. Well, it makes sense to us.
It does with that last modified, does get tricky because if you check it accidentally and then uncheck it, it's still going to run, right?
Yeah. It might fire twice then because it was modified twice.
That is true. That is true. Of course, it will only run like every X number of minutes. So hopefully it'll only catch it once. So that's actually a really, really good point. This might actually be a perfect use case scenario for doing the webhooks instead of this. So you don't actually have accidental clicks or, something actually triggering twice.
Yeah. I think one of Kavan's solutions is instead of checkboxes, she uses single select values because it's more purposeful. You have to click twice to make that change. And so it's harder to accidentally sort of make it ready.
Yes. Right. That's a really, really great idea. Have the drop-down list for the single select. And by the way, there are other ways that you can do this as well. So there's this way that we're doing it right now. Oh, by the way, it asks you for the label field, how you refer to each record. So that's usually your primary field. So you choose invoice number there. And then I'm just going to say, okay, for now, we could skip over this. But there's other ways you can do this as well. It asks you, when do you want to start monitoring? And you could say from now on. For example, and before I move on, I'll show you some of these other things. You can also do something on a schedule where you search records. And with and this actually might be more bulletproof if you don't want to go the webhook way, or if you don't want to go the watch records way. What you can do is you can start your automation. But see, this is the cool thing about Integromat, how you can just sort of drag and drop these things around. So what you could also do is, this is a little more bulletproof, is you could have it search your invoices base in the invoices table. And then this is optional if you want to sort your records or choose a specific view. These two are optional. But then what you could do is you could choose a formula. So what you could say is, let's see what the name of our field is, email invoice ? These are just Airtable formulas here. And basically, as long as the formula results in anything except for a 0, false, blank, not a number, or error, or the brackets here. And so basically, it could result in a 1, it could result in anything, then it will return those records. So what we could say is email invoice ? And that's it. That's actually a valid Airtable formula. That would actually, I think, result in 1 if it's checked.
Yes.
And so what we could do here, and then you can actually, add on to that formula, where you could say, if the invoice was already sent, if the invoice sent date already was in the past and email invoice is checked, then result in a 1. So this could be nice to prevent that problem that we were talking about. So what I'm thinking is maybe we'll go with that one instead because that's more bulletproof. And what you can do in Integromat is this little icon here is the scheduling icon. So I'm going to move that over to this.
Okay. I use Integromat more than I use Zapier. I did not know you could do that.
I didn't either.
Oh, I love that.
I feel like an idiot.
This is what I'm talking about. Like there's so many little things. It takes longer to figure these things out, Like with Zapier, there's no guesswork. It's just boom, 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 boom. And it's like these little things which make it harder to learn at first. And then once you know it, then it becomes easier. So stick with it. Not to you, Camille, but to the people watching, I would recommend to them to stick with it because eventually you'll become a pro at it. So this now is our first record here. And I'm going to delete this one. You just right click on this and you delete. Oh, and Camille, one other thing that you may not know, and this one I just learned like a few months ago. I can't believe this. I never noticed this one before, which is rename. You can actually rename these modules and you could say whatever you want here. You could say we're searching for invoices to send. And then it changes the name of your module here. Instead of the default is every single module says the word Airtable on it.
Yeah. Surely in my head, I must have rationalized, sure, they would let you rename modules, and I've never done it. Because when Integromat, we'll see it when you add more steps, what Integromat would do is be like Airtable, the name of the module, which you've now renamed, and then that 2 next to it lets you know specifically which one. Each module has a unique ID. I think it's the order in which they were added, kind of like an auto number in Airtable, if you're familiar. And so that's how you could differentiate it if you had multiple Airtables, but it's kind of hard to remember which one is which. That's easy. Rename it.
Right. That's such a great point. Because in all your future modules, you'll be referring to these little numbers, but they'll also show this word, but it'll normally say 2, Airtable 3, Airtable 4, Airtable 5, Airtable what? But if you rename them, it makes it easier.
Yeah.
So basically what we've done here is, so now we've told it on a schedule every 15 minutes, because on my plan, I can't go less. Every 15 minutes, as soon as we turn on this schedule here, this is the on-off switch. Oh, I guess it's
I don't think we can see that.
Oh, you can't. Oh, is that off screen?
It's off screen.
Oh, sorry. I wonder if I make my, oh, now can you see it a little better?
Yes.
Or no? Yeah. Oh, okay, good. Thank you so much for telling me that. This is how you save your scenario right here. And can I turn this on? Let me see. Yeah. And so now it's on. So every 15 minutes, it's going to run. And it's going to, this is just the first step, of course. And it's going to search for any records where email invoice is checked. That's just our simple formula there. And what you can do is you can test your scenario at any time just by clicking on this run once button. And so it's going to run. And then it tells us here that little number 1 there means that it had 1 result. So if I click on this, it actually shows us they call them bundles are the results. And so it found 1 bundle here, and it shows that it found invoice number 1001. And here's all the fields that it pulled from Airtable. So that's like a really quick way of checking your work so far to see if everything's working right. And if we go back into Airtable here, we'll see that invoice number 1001 was indeed the one that we checked. And so now if we go back here, now what we want to do is we want to send somebody an email to let them know that this is their invoice and like put all the invoice information in. Now, the funny thing is this may be where it's a little bit easier in Airtable using their automations than Integromat, because Integromat doesn't just have like a generic email send thing. You actually have to use, an email service, whether it's just your Gmail, if you're just sending out 1 email at a time. If you're doing bulk emails, you would need to do MailChimp or some other email sending service. So in our case, maybe we'll use Gmail because I think I have that already set up in here. So I'm going to use Gmail and we are going to send an email. So Then what you do is you choose who you want to. Oh yeah, so I already have this. This is my public Gmail account there. And we're going to say, who do we want to send this to? And so we actually don't have the person's email address pulled in yet because it only pulled in all the fields from the invoices table. So, many different ways we could deal with that. Probably the easiest way is to deal with it on the Airtable end and just create a lookup field. Or you could actually, add extra steps in here to, search for that particular person's email address. But it's much easier to just go into Airtable, and we'll just add a lookup field here, customer email.
And Integromat is similar to Zapier, that it charges for each individual step, right? That gets counted. So that would have counted towards your usage.
That is correct. So that would have counted as one. Yeah, if you go, let me save this real quick. It warns you that you haven't done anything with this yet. So I'm going to go back. Let's save it. Oh, is it going to let me do it? Okay, yeah. So that is correct. You get charged per step, just like Zapier. And it shows you here that we used up. Oh, did I run this 20? I don't know. We had one and then one. So we would have been charged for 2 so far. And so it gives you the grand total number of steps that your thing is taken to run, and it keeps a history for the last 30 days here. So you could see, and then they give you like a dashboard like Zapier where you can see, how your operations are running and all that stuff. And yeah, if I go to their pricing page here real quick, you'll see that on their free plan, you get 1,000 operations. Those are steps. And then for $9, only $9 a month, you get 10,000 operations. So it's so affordable. So anyways, we're back here now. And did I look up the email address? Yeah. So we have the person's email address associated with their invoice. So this is Jane Smith's invoice. And we are now going to go in here and we're going to choose the email address. And this is what Camille was talking about earlier, is that this is where it shows you what module you're pulling from. So it says the number 2 here. Normally it would just say Airtable 2 dash search records, but now we have a much more descriptive title here. And I think it doesn't show the email address because that email address was not sent through when we last ran our test. This is similar to Zapier as well, where you actually have to run a test in order for it to populate with all the sample data. And if there is no sample data for that, it's not going to come through. So what we'll need to do is we'll need to run this one more time. And, it actually wants us to, it's not going to let us because this isn't set up. So I'm going to break this link here so I can run this. And now, again, it found one record. That's what that one means there. And I'll just save this. And now we'll reconnect it. And now I will add a recipient, and our email address should be there this time. Here it is, customer email. And since a lookup field in Airtable is an array, you can see that it could potentially have multiple things here. So, you may have to pick something differently based on your scenario if you're working with arrays. I think for an email address, it will work because it'll automatically put commas in.
Yeah, so, I think so too.
Cool, thank you. And I'll add that there, and then we'll say subject, your invoice, or what we could say is we can actually choose the invoice number field from Airtable. So invoice number is ready. And then for the content, you can actually use HTML tags here, and you could do whatever you want here. You could say, so let's say we're not going to use HTML tags. You can just say hi, and then you could choose the person's name, where would that be? Customer here. Oh, wait, this is, this is the link. So you know what? We would have had to do that whole thing again with the lookup of the name in order to make that happen. So for now, let's just call them by their record ID number. How's that? But be aware that you'll need to set that up in Airtable, which is, I think, the quickest way to do it. Yeah. And then you could say, they're actually, it wouldn't recognize that return unless we did it with HTML. So what you could do is you could just make this like a paragraph here, and you could say your invoice number 1001 was created on, then you put the date created in there. And there's ways to format the date too. Like, I don't know for sure if it's going to come across like this or if it's going to put it in the, that weird date format, but there's
the timestamp.
Yeah, the timestamp. However, so this is just a quick example, but you have lots of different options up here. So this is also one of those areas where I feel it's more advanced than Zapier because they got all these different functions. So it's almost like creating formulas in Airtable. You've all these different formulas for formatting your dates, parsing your dates, setting the months, blah, blah, blah. They have different things here. There's math functions, there's text functions. They have tons of array functions. So you can do really advanced work with arrays. So there's a lot of different things here. And then we'll just say, thanks, team. And then you could add an attachment. And that becomes a whole nother thing. You could either pull an attachment from Airtable, or you could download attachments from, cloud services, all sorts of things. So you say, okay, here. And we should try this and see if this works. Dan, what is your email? I'll send you a.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll send
that. Dan at openside.com.
Dan at openside.com. Well, let me put a comment here. I don't want to risk it, Camille, to add you there. I want to make sure that works.
If you change John's email to mine and then link that record to John as well, that might work. So
okay, let's try that.
KAMILLEI and then parks@gmail.
All right, cool. So now we'll go into this invoice. Yeah, and I'll link it to 2 customers. Good idea. Oops.
I think it's
linking. You can see this is an old database. This option doesn't exist.
Yeah, I was going to say, I haven't seen that in years.
I know. I love that option. I don't know why they got rid of that. So we'll add you in there as well. And we are hoping that that we don't do anything extra in terms of this array having 2 email addresses. So this is one of those live demo things which we hope is going to work. Otherwise, there's ways around it.
Yeah.
Thank you for the fingers crossed. Okay, so I'm going to save this, and we are going to run this and see how this works, or if it works.
I will be watching.
It did not work. So it gave us an error message here, and it says invalid email address in parameter email. Okay, so we probably have to go through a parsing process. They're using one of their array functions to actually parse it out and put commas in between it. I don't think we have time to go through that at the moment. So I'm just going to go back down to 1 email address.
All right.
So let's see. I'm going to get rid of one of these. I don't know who I got rid of. Let's see. Oops. Okay, so who do we have left? Okay, Dan is there. So let's see. We're going to go back here. And now this will hopefully run. Let's see. So it's searching for the invoices. Oh, and that still says can't send it. Let's see. Invalid email address. Oh,
so it's just because it's an array in general. So
yeah,
to get so it doesn't like arrays.
Yeah. So you know what I'll do?
Because you can email multiple people at once. I would have thought that it would have accepted arrays by default. So yeah. I guess you have to turn that array to string or whatever the function in Airtable.
Or in Airtable, use a roll up instead of a lookup.
Or a formula field in Airtable. And also, this may be one of those things I think, see, this is where Integromat gets a little tricky once you keep playing with it. I think this might work if we turn on the mapping feature. I think with this thing here, let me just do something here real quick. This sort of makes it really, really easy for you to type email addresses here. But I don't, so this is like sort of Integromat's own interface. I don't think that accepts arrays, but I bet if we turn on the mapping, I think it does accept arrays. Yeah. So Let me check that.
Justin was saying to select the one when you.
Oh, yeah, that's the other option also.
Yeah. So if you know, for instance, that you always want to send to the first item in the array, then that works. But if you were trying to do what we were trying to do, or sending to multiple people, it would only ever send it to that first person, and it's not always guaranteed who the first person is. It depends on how you linked them together in Airtable. So, it's a little tricky going that route, but for the purposes of this demonstration, that would have worked.
Exactly. So let's run this and see if it actually accepted the array once you turn on mapping. Yes, it did. So it sent one email. And now if we go back now, Camille, I'm going to add you in. And how do we do that? That's right. I added you as a customer here. So now I'm going to add John Smith. And Dan, did you get the email, by the way, on your end?
Not yet.
Okay.
Okay. Got it. I got
it. Nice. And now we're going to try it. And now it should send it to both of you guys. So I'm going to run once now. And still just one email that was sent, but it should be to 2 different people, hopefully. Let's see. Yep. It sent it to 2 people. And did you get it, Camille?
I did.
Nice.
Invoice is ready.
Your invoice is ready. Nice. And then one of the cool things, and this is, by the way, I think the exact same in Zapier, you can see all of the output that it's sent. You could even download what they call output bundles, and you could see, not in this case. This is input bundle is what I was looking for. And it shows you everything that was sent.
Yeah.
So that's how you do that array thing, is by turning on the mapping function, and then it'll accept arrays. So see how simple it is?
It is simple. It's just remembering which, toggles to turn on, I think is, but once you get it, you kind of get it. And then it's moving stuff in and around, like dragging which step goes before which is a lot easier. And then looping through, like you were saying, we didn't do it in this example, but maybe in a future episode, we'd show how you could loop and send. Maybe Dan gets an email that just says, "Hi, Dan," and I get an email that says, "Hi, Camille." You could do that with Integromat using their, I'm forgetting their term for it, but it would loop through each of the linked records and send individual.
That's right. Yeah, they call that iteration.
Iterations. There you go.
Yeah, and I see in the comments that Hannah and Justin were saying that, we had already discussed that. I think that if we always knew that we just wanted the first email address in there, you just choose this number 1 here. Then you won't have that problem that we were dealing with. And that will even work if the mapping is turned off.
Yeah.
Here. You just
now that I'm seeing their user interface, I'm realizing that it is an array, but you're feeding an array into an array. And that was the issue.
And that was the error. Exactly. So, excuse me. Yeah. So maybe this wasn't the best example of how easy Integromat is, but you can see, how it's very, very flexible and customizable. And there's lots of little things you can tweak in it. It's sort of like, I sort of compare it, to Photoshop. It's sort of like you have the tools to do what you want to do with it, essentially.
Yeah, very powerful. Very, very good stuff there. Appreciate that. And if plug for Scott, if you're looking for Integromat, Scott's an official expert, right, in the Integromat partnership program and can help you out.
Thank you. They just upgraded me to Expert Plus.
Expert Plus.
But maybe with the mistakes I made today, maybe there needs to be another level of plus, which I haven't achieved yet.
I don't know. I think you might go down to minus. Expert minus.
If they're watching, I just dropped a minus.
Yeah. Very good. Well, thanks for coming on, Scott. And always glad to have you with us and learn from you and great insight. For timing, I think we'll keep our next segment for next week's episode. Due to constraints on time, but check out OnToAir, our primary sponsor, ontoair.com, and check out all the apps that we have there. Until then, we're excited to be with you for season 10. We want more guests on. So if you haven't been on with us and you have something cool to share, reach out to us. We'd love to see what you're working on and see everything that you're building on air. So until then, we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Thank you for joining today's episode. We hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to check out our sponsor, ontoair.com, and we will see you next time on the Built on Air podcast.